So we're going to work on putting together a profile that we can leverage and putting a wall covering on a wall inside of Revit. There's a few different components that we need to create in order to make this happen properly for this project. The first thing that we're going to create is a profile. This profile is for a base that we're going to be placing at the bottom of a new wall type that's going to be inside of Revit. Then we're going to apply that wall type in the project and then associate it with the existing CMU wall, essentially joining the two together. The reason behind this is so that way all openings that we already have existing in that CMU wall for windows and doors also cut the geometry we're going to be laying out in the project after we've placed it. So we're going to start off by utilizing Revit 2013 to create a new profile. To start this process, we need to go to the Revit application button, New, Family. The family template type that we need to select is going to be Profiles, Hosted. This is going to be a hosted profile because it will be part of a wall family. So go to Profiles, Hosted, select that template, and hit Open. So the first things that we're going to see when we open this template file is we're going to see basically some information that tells us what side is the host face and what side is the object. So the host face tells us how it's going to be actually associated with an object. If we generate some line work over on the host side, it's going to be embedded inside the host. If we utilize line work on the right side or the right quadrant here, it's going to be on the face of the host. I'm going to use a quadrant from this line and up. The insertion point tells me at what point will I be managing this object. If we're dealing with an object that is going to be to the center, we're going to dimension to the center point, we'll want to make sure that we conduct that object between the center line here. The other part of this is that if we want something that's going to be hosted to like a top or to the base of a wall, we'll want to utilize those respective pieces. To the top, we'll probably go to a top of a profile here. If we're going to go to utilize a base, we'll use the base going up from this line here. In this case, we're going to be doing a base. So inside the profile template, there's no 3D view. This is purely two-dimensional objects. What we need to do is go ahead and define what our base is going to be. This case is pretty simple. We are just going to draw a 4-inch base at the moment. It's going to be an 1/8 inch, 1/4 inch, 1/8 inch stump on top. Come down. Needs to be 3 7/8, 3 3/4 off. That gives us a 1/4 inch for the floor to be even. At this point, let's go ahead and make this 3 inches. And all profiles, they have to close. So you want to make sure this is almost like a continuous polyline. The next tool that we're going to use is to get that fillet in here, so that way we have a radius for the piece coming up along the wall. Back to create, line, there's a tool called the fillet arc tool. Utilize that. Typically what I do is I pick the two lines that I want that arc in. I'll place it. Before I click anywhere else, I select the radius and define the radius of that arc. In this case, we're going to go ahead and make this 1 inch. And now we have that nice sloping piece that comes up into the wall. Now, an added piece to this is we can make this parametric. So we can have this one profile where we can adjust how tall is the base. Do we want 4-inch base or do we want 6-inch base? How far out does that base go? Is it going to be 1 inch to 2 inches? So I will place two reference planes. RP is the shortcut key to define basically where I want objects to go to. The next thing I need is a couple of dimensions. DI is the shortcut key. First dimension is going to be the height of that base. The second dimension is going to be the length of the base on the bottom. Once you've placed the two dimensions, select one, go up to the label, add a parameter, call it height. This is going to be a type parameter, something that we can assign different base types to. A 6-inch base, a 4-inch base. We'll get into that here in a second. Next thing we want to do is select the bottom dimension, add parameter, and we'll call this depth. Once again, it's going to be a type parameter, and hit OK. Now that we have those two labels in, under the type parameters for the family, you can see that we can control those two dimensions. Also, we can go in and fill out some identity data here, so that way we can define who the manufacturer is, where the profile comes from, and so on and so forth, even cost per foot. In this case, we don't need that because we can embed that into the wall type itself. So the first thing I want to do is I want to use the align tool to align some certain elements, key elements within this object to align with these reference planes. So if I move the reference planes, the object moves also. So utilizing the align tool, select the reference plane, and then the top. If you see this lock here, that's constrain. We want to go ahead and constrain the relationship. So if the reference plane moves, the line will move also. Lock that relationship. We'll go over here to the bottom. Go ahead and constrain that. And what we want to do now is call flexing the element. Go back to the type properties here. Let's go ahead and set this at 8-inch. And then the depth we'll set at 2-inch. Hit apply. Now we should see the base flex and change shape, which is good. That kind of starts us off. It tells us that's working properly. So at this point, I'm going to set this at 6-inch. Hit apply, and everything moves the way we need it to move. We could even add a dimension to the radius of this arc, so that way we can control that independently also to make it smaller or larger as needed. So I'm going to hit apply and hit OK. Next thing I need to do is I need to save this family and provide it a name. Do a save as. Locate a directory that you want to place it in. In this case, I'm going to put it under our directory under Revit, Families. We have a folder in here called Profiles. I'm going to call this the Wainscot base. Set my options to 1 backup. Click Save. So now we have the profile. We can go ahead and close this and then open up our project. So once you have your file open, we need to apply the profile that we just created to a wall type that we're about to create. Now this wall type consists of basically two parts. You have a structural component, which is within the core, which is going to be the 1/8-inch thick wall covering. And then we're also going to apply a sweep. That sweep will consist of the profile that we just created. To do this, I suggest that we zoom in on the area that we're going to be working with, which is going to be this wall here. We're going to start the wall command. We're going to edit the type. What I want to do is choose another type to start this work with. Typically I choose a generic wall type to kind of give me a starting point to work with the walls. After selecting generic 5, I'm going to say duplicate. At this point I want to name the wall type so it makes sense. Once that wall type is named, we can go ahead and edit some of the information that is going to help us define what it is in a project like working with CDCR. The assembly description right now is currently exterior walls. We want to change that so it represents interior wall finishes. So we'll go ahead and choose interiors, interior finishes, wall finish, and coatings. Notice that the assembly description changes its name. We can add a bunch of different information here, including cost, fire rating, anything that you need. We can go ahead and place in here. I'll go ahead and go into under structure and hit the edit button. This is going to move me into the edit assembly dialog box. You want to have the preview window open. If it's not open when you initially start, click the preview button and switch this to a section. The reason why we want to go into a section is so we can also add sweeps, reveals, regions. If you have it set up in plan, this box grays out. Notice it says section preview only. The first thing that we want to do is go ahead and define one of the structures in the wall. We can say that this is a finish layer and that it's going to be 1/8 of an inch. So now we get a really narrow wall, of course. You want to uncheck structural member because it's not. Also, if you want the sample to be a little bit smaller so it's easier to fit in this window, there's a sample height up top here. We'll go ahead and change that to 8 feet. Notice how the sample height changes. If we zoom in, we want to zoom into the bottom of this piece here. Now we need to add the sweep. The sweep is really going to be the base, that integral 6-inch base. So click on the sweeps button. The dialog box for wall sweeps pops up. To explain this, we have the index, where it's going to be located, what the profile is. We can set the material, distance. Right now we need to load a profile. We just generated a new profile under the project directory. So go ahead and grab that profile and load it into the project. Once it's loaded, we need to essentially add it to the dialog box. So there's an add button. Add the profile. Notice that it says default. We want to make sure that that's set to Wainscot. At this point, we can go ahead and define material if we know what the material is. We can set the distance from the base, so that way we can adjust how high off the base of the wall it is. We can also go from the top. We can flip the base. But first, before we get into all that, let's go ahead and hit apply. Don't hit OK because it'll get you out of this dialog box. As long as you keep hitting apply while you make changes, you're going to see those changes on this on the other dialog box where we have the preview. So right now we have everything set up a distance from base, and it's currently set at 0. If we change that to 1 inch, we'll see that the base will rise up off the floor by 1 inch. Which side this goes on, we can also define, exterior or interior. It really depends on what you're looking to do. In this case, we're going to go ahead and set this to the exterior portion of the wall. Offset allows us to offset it either away from the wall or into the wall. If we set this as a 1 inch offset, it'll move 1 inch away from the wall. In this case, it's right up to the face. We know that we need to push it back 1/8 of an inch so that the base is in line with the wall covering. So we're going to set this to a negative 1/8 of an inch. Notice how that now aligns with the wall piece itself. The other part of this is flip. Flip essentially flips the profile of the wall 180 degrees, or a mirror. The setback is how far we set back the end of the sweep from the end of the wall. You can have a 1/2 inch setback, or a 1/4 inch setback, or a 3 inch setback, depending on if you have a wall jamb or a door jamb in the way, or a window jamb, or another piece that you want to embellish in. Sometimes we have reveals that don't quite go all the way to the end of the wall. We can have them staggered and show what those setbacks are. The other pieces is cuts wall. We want to uncheck that. This is not a piece that's going to cut a wall. Typically we'll utilize that for structural pieces that do cut through a wall. Or we can make this cuttable. So if a wall does cross over the path of this one, it'll cut through both the wall and also the sweep. We'll go ahead and assign that. Once this is done, we'll click OK, which brings us back to this next dialog box, and then we'll click OK. So our wall style has now been generated. Something that we want to do is wrapping at ends. We want to go ahead and set that to exterior. So the exterior portion of the wall wraps around the end. This allows us to make sure that we miter our base as we draw it out. Functions interior, we are ready to go ahead and place this in the project. So we have 2 more steps to do once we've created this style. Is we need to place it in our project and then join the existing CMU wall to this new wall that's going to be aligned to the face. what I'm going to do is essentially draw these walls not quite on the face. I'm going to keep them kind of off so that way I can line them in. Also, before you start drawing, verify that the information up here is correct. Right now I have a base offset set at 11 feet. That means it's going to start this wall 11 feet off the ground, so I'm going to lose it. I won't see it while I'm drawing it in plan. Make sure that this is set to 0 before you start drawing any of these walls. If you don't, you're probably going to get an error that's going to pop up saying none of the items are visible in this view. The unconnected height of this is going to be 4 feet. So we're set to draw these walls in. You will see a portion of this where you can flip it one side or the other. So let's go ahead and start drawing the walls in. Notice how the wall itself, the base is on the wrong side. That's easy enough to fix if you use the space bar to flip them back and forth. So I've just flipped over for the next couple of pieces I'm going to plug in. The reason why I'm drawing it off and away from the wall is sometimes Revit wants to join to existing walls. In this case, we want it to join to itself, but we don't want it to join to the walls that are already drawn. That becomes problematic when we're trying to finalize our design. I'm not going to go too overboard with laying all this out. We'll go ahead and finish up with this one wall. Now we do have a piece of base that isn't quite set up with everything else. You'll see that it's kind of flipped. If we select it and hit the space bar, it'll flip it. Notice how it miters those corners now. Now the easiest way to get these two aligned is to use the align tool. So one, we can align an end of the wall with the end of this wall. Then we can align an edge to an edge. Make sure you grab the right edge. And also you do it in the right order. That way we don't have to erase any items. So I'm going to go ahead and finish up this piece here, and then we'll move on to the next step. As you kind of understand the process that we're going through right now. So let's go ahead and pause there for a second. So we've go ahead and laid out this new wall. We've aligned the faces together. Let's take a look at an elevation and see what we got. So I'm going to go ahead and open up the wall elevation from here. And we notice that that new wall goes right in front of everything. Well, looks like I have a piece here that doesn't need to be routed around due to the fire extinguisher cabinet. Easy enough to fix. We can go ahead and delete that piece and delete these final edges from this elevation. And then I can delete this small piece off the end and align it, similar like working on a plan, to the wall edge. And I'll go ahead and complete that. So now that we have these pieces in, we need to figure out a way of cutting the holes for the windows and doors into this wall segment. That process is actually fairly simple. We can either do it here in an elevation or we can do it in a plan. So underneath the Modify tab, under Geometry, we have a tool called Join. Join allows us to join similar geometry together to get an effect that we'd like to have. So in this case, we want to join the face of this wall to this wall. When that happens, it basically says, hey, you're one piece. And at that point, any cuts or holes or openings that are in place in the CMU wall will transfer over into the wainscot. I just continue this process by going ahead and selecting the wall behind. Typically, if you grab around a door jamb, you'll go ahead and pick up this information in elevation or a window jamb. This now cuts the wainscot with the openings, doors, and also windows. In a case where we don't want to see that 6-inch line, maybe it's an integral piece that's going to be made all the way down to the floor, and we don't want that line represented, we need to use a tool called a line work tool. So on the Modify tab under View, there's a tool that says LW Line Work. Click that tool and then choose what kind of line style you want to change the representation to. In this case, I want to go ahead and pick the invisible line. Invisible line means it turns that line off inside of this view. You click once, you notice that that line disappears. And we can go ahead and do that for this elevation. And now we have more of a look that we need. Of course, at this scale you don't quite see the radius, but it is there, so we do have a bunch of detail. So that's how we create a wainscot in a situation where we're linking some information in. This is also one of the simplest solutions to use because now we can schedule it to find out how many lineal feet of wainscot we need to purchase for the job. So hopefully this helps you guys out, and we'll see you soon.